Good morning. Well, I wanted to do a short video on the discussion assignments because we have a couple of rules that might be a little bit peculiar to some instructors, particularly if you're coming from undergrad. So I just wanted to go through this rather quickly. It's not really difficult. It is a little bit tedious, but luckily we've revised our discussion assignments so that there are fewer discussion assignments per learning plan, so it shouldn't be too arduous of a task to do. To get to the discussion assignments, you will go under course materials and select discussions, and then you'll see your discussion assignments here, the names of them: LP 1.1, LP 1.2. In the first learning plan, we generally have a non-graded introduction thread and then two graded assignments. And I think for the majority of classes, what you'll see is that outside of LP1, once you get into LP2, LP3, there'll just be two discussion assignments. There might be some older classes that we haven't gotten around to yet that still have 3 questions, but for the most part, you're dealing with 2 questions per learning plan. And again, a learning plan is 2 weeks long. You can change your settings here. There are a couple of different ways. Like, this is the view that I prefer. I find it easier to, or I find this is the easiest way to manage my discussion questions and to get to the correct one. There are different ways, like there are grid views, and there's a setting where students cannot even see the discussion a question until they have posted on the discussion question. Um, I'm not a big fan of that one, and I find that it really just causes more trouble than solutions. Um, so I would just go ahead and leave that alone. If students say, hey, I'm not seeing any discussion posts, let me know, and basically we need to go in here and make a couple of modifications to give them access to it. We do want students posting early, but at the same time, it's not helping anyone if somebody can't see the post. So for instance, even though the idea is that um, we're quote unquote encouraging them to post by withholding anybody else's post until they post, at the same time, it is that would also be punishing those students who posted early because nobody's reading their posts or replying to them. So that's something that I think they do to some degree at undergrad. I don't do it at undergrad, and I really don't want to do it at the graduate level. Um, so just going back to the discussion assignments, if you click on any discussion assignment, there is a rubric. Let me just click right here. Oops. There is actually a rubric that you will see linked to each discussion assignment. Now, of course, now I can't find it. Um, oh, discussion rubric right here. So if you click on this, and students have access to this as well. So on every discussion assignment, there is always that rubric. And this rubric actually explains what the policies are for the discussion assignment. So for the discussion assignment, the expectation is that they'll post their main post during the first week. So days 1 through 7 out of a 14-day learning plan, they can post their 2 main posts. They're also free to leave feedback if they like. It's not required, but if they do not have their main post posted by the 7th day, if they wait until day 8 or 9 or 10, there's an automatic deduction on the main post. Um, and then week 2 is kind of left open for people to interact with each other by leaving feedback. In Now the way the grade is done is that 50% of their grade is for the main post, 50% of their grade is for the discussion assignments. And D2L does hold decimal points. So if it's a 25 point discussion board, 12 and a half points of that 25 points are for the main post, 12 and a half are for the participation. With the main post, a couple of things to look for. Um, besides the date besides making sure that they post it within the first 7 days, um, this this learning plan, or sorry, this quarter and moving forward, we've included a comment or a research requirement. Now I have kind of um, I read the posts, or I read the instructions as I made modifications. So if a question is designed so that there's really no way to do research, then there won't be any comment about supporting your answer. But there aren't very many of those. Some classes, the only discussion assignment where there's not a research requirement will be the introduction post. There are a couple of other classes where you might see one or two discussion questions that don't have a comment about the research requirement, just because the way they were designed doesn't really lend well to 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 doing research. But we have tried to make the majority of discussion questions have some sort of research component. I think in some classes it might say that you need to support it with one source. In some cases, it might require two sources. Um, Whatever is stated in the instruction is the minimum requirement. A student may um, have a question that says, support your answer with at least one credible source. And they may include a credible source, but that credible source may not be sufficient. So even though it says you need at least, or support your answer with one credible source, that's really the minimum. If their source does not provide enough support, then you should take deductions for that source not being sufficient. Um, they're welcome to use as many sources as they need. As a subject matter expert, basically, you need to determine whether their answer is well supported with the research that they had, or if they need to include more. Um, I would say that we don't expect every single bit of their discussion post to be supported, but I mean, if what they did, sorry about those boxes keep popping up. Let me close that. If what you did you feel was a sufficient amount of research and it was a credible source and they supported it correctly, then that requirement has been fulfilled. But in many cases, you may have a student who the bulk of their answer is about one question, and then they have maybe the discussion assignment has three parts, and they chose a source that only supports a small part of one of their answers, and you're thinking, okay, well, they did do research, but really they supported the wrong part of the assignment. The part of the assignment that really should have support didn't have any support, and they provided support for part of the assignment that really didn't need support. In which case, I would take deductions for the major part of the assignment, or the part of the assignment that I needed support not being supported. But I would still give them credit for the fact that they, at least some credit for the fact that they did at least attempt to support their answer. Um, I would say, reasonably, anywhere between one and three sources on the discussion board will probably be sufficient, depending on how good the source is. But again, you may have students who are doing research and supporting something that really makes no sense for why they actually chose that particular part of the assignment to support with research. Um, so that's the main post. Pretty easy. If there are writing errors, please make sure that you identify the writing errors in your feedback and take deductions. What we see a lot of on the discussion assignments in particular is I get instructors going 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. If there are any errors, it's not 100%. I mean, you cannot, it is not logical to say that an assignment that has spelling errors is 100%. That diminishes the meaning of 100% for those students who actually do have 100%. Usually with writing errors, if there are one or two errors, it might be 1 or 2% of their grade. If there are a substantial number of writing errors, like spelling, or if they're using net or texting, speak maybe up to 10% of their grade. We usually don't deduct more than 10% of a grade for writing errors unless it gets to the point where I don't know what you're saying because there are so many writing errors, in which case then that is beyond the point of writing errors. That gets into content, and that's a much bigger issue. But you're usually not going to see that. So make sure that if there are errors, you deduct for those. And the rubric kind of gives you an idea of where you will be as far as those deductions go. The more challenging part to keep track of is the participation. We used to have students who were posting, they're leaving 2 posts, and then they would get 100%. And it clearly stated in the curriculum that 2 posts was a minimal, or that was only meeting the minimum expectations, and that was C work. So what we did is we didn't change anything. We were still working off of the same explanation about minimal effort equals a C, but we just kind of flushed out the explanation so that people could understand, okay, first of all, you were not supposed to be getting 100% for leaving only 2 feedback comments. Now, for me, that was just as much the instructor's fault as it was the students, because if the instructors are letting students only post 2 feedback comments and giving them 100%, then the instructor's not doing their job. So we did have quite a bit of pushback the first quarter that we implemented this, but it really has settled down. With the participation, there are 2 things to look for. Number one, or 3 things really. The number one is the quality of post. If it's not substantive or substantive, it doesn't count. Good post, if somebody's answer or reply is good post, or you did a good job, or this looks great, that means absolutely nothing. There is no content. Nobody learns anything from that. They have to have new information or new ideas or an explanation in their answers. So if they say, good post, I really agree with you because, and then they add an explanation or maybe a little vignette from their own experience, then that's meaningful, and then that gets credit. But the way that I treat those posts that are like good job is I don't even acknowledge that they're there, because that's not that's not really feedback. Um, in order for a student to be eligible for maximum points on the participation part of the grade, they have to have at least 4 substantive posts. That would give them between 90 to 100% on the half of the grade that belongs to or reflects the participation component. If they have 3 substantive posts, that is a B on the participation part. If they have 2, that would be a C on the participation part. And then if they didn't have any, or if they had 1 or fewer, then it's less than, then it's a 70 or below. So this is, to some degree, it's really the same rules or the same policies that were in place back in the day when students were only leaving 2 posts. 2 posts was still a C back then, and it's a C now. The difference is that we enforce it, and because we've broken the discussion grade up into 2 parts, they could leave only 2 feedback comments, and if they have a really good main post, they could still get a B rather than getting a C. So this is actually a little bit more generous. It wasn't easy explaining that to students, but this is actually a little bit more generous. So the quality of the post is one thing to look at. The number of posts is another thing to look at, and then the last thing to look at is the timing. What we were seeing, and I'm sure that you guys have seen this, or ladies and gentlemen, you've all seen this. This happens with any online program where there are discussion assignments. You have a couple of students who are posting their main post on day 1 and day 2, and hallelujah for them. Thank goodness they are out there. Unfortunately, they are not the majority of the class, and unfortunately, their grade also rides on the rest of the class, and the rest of the class is waiting until Sunday night at 10 o'clock to post their part of the discussion assignment. So that is bad for those students, but it's also bad for the students who posted early because they have nobody to reply to until those students decide to cram all of their posts in at the last minute. So what we did is we decided to penalize those students who were waiting, who were trying to post everything at the last minute. I mean, we have a 2-week learning plan. Literally, we would have at least half the class posting all of their posts on day 14 right before the assignment was due. And so in order to make that or to discourage that, that's why we have the main post due during the first week and we have that enforced with a late penalty. With the participate overall, students cannot post on just one day or just on 2 days. They have to post on at least 3 different days during a learning plan. And those 3 days cannot be all in the same week. So they can post once, like on one day during week 1 and 2 days during week 2, or 2 days during week 1 and one day during week 2. But they have to spread out their posts. And this does get them on the discussion board more frequently. It hasn't solved every problem, of course, but unfortunately, I have yet to figure out how to solve time management problems for students, or how to solve motivational problems for students. A couple of things that I have found to be helpful with getting students to post early is that with my class, and you are expected to be an active participant on the discussion board. Faculty members are required to post at least 10 times during the first week and 10 times during the second week. It can be 5 posts on one discussion board, 5 posts on the other during week 1, or maybe you'll focus on one. I would recommend not focusing all on one discussion board in one week and one discussion board in the other week. I would recommend being on both discussion assignments, but the expectation is that basically you're going to leave 2 posts per day, Monday through Friday. Um, a couple of things that you'll want to keep in mind is number one, try to respond to every student at least once during a learning plan. For the most part, most of you are going to have between. We usually cap the classes at 25. So it shouldn't be a problem for you to at least have some kind of comment at every, reply to at least one post from each student so that they get a sense that you're there. That's why you're an active participant, or one of the reasons why you're an active participant on the discussion board. But also, we don't want anybody to feel ignored. We don't want people who are just flying under the radar. I mean, we really want for them to be an active part of the discussion, and part of that is you being an active part of the discussion. So from the faculty point of view, a couple of things that you want to do besides, being on the discussion board and replying to each student. With the quality of posts, what I look for is I try to make sure that if a student has a deficiency in their post, that I always address them. And the earlier that I can address them, the better. So during that first week, and I let students know, like, I'm going to be on the discussion board Monday through Friday. If you want feedback from me, make sure that you post before Friday, because Saturday and Sunday are my days off. I'll check email, but I'm not going to be on the discussion board. And so if you post on Saturday and you forgot something on your post, or you missed something, or you misunderstood something, you're not going to get a chance to get feedback from me. You're going to have to just go it with, you're going to have to basically just go with that post and hope for the best. But to reinforce that, what I do is if I see that someone has, if they have not supported their answer, I let them know I reply to them and say, hey, don't forget to support your answer. If their APA is incorrect, I let them know. It's like, you might want to take a look at how to, how to cite a blog, or whatever. But just try to give them a little bit of guidance, because that will help them identify if there's a problem with their post and they still have time to revise it. But another thing that I do is I let students know that when I reply to a student on the discussion board, read, even if I'm not replying to you, read my feedback to that person, because you could be doing the same thing that they're doing. And I may not get a chance, you may post on Saturday and I may not get a chance to leave you feedback. So, make sure that you read all of my feedback to students. And I also try to make it very clear that I'm not picking on anyone. I am trying to make sure that you are going to submit the best discussion board that you can. Every once in a while, I'll get a student who'll say, I don't appreciate you calling me out in front of the entire class like that. I'm not calling anyone out like that. I do it respectfully, and I I do it as a suggestion. Um, but I'm also, it's not just for that student's benefit, it's for everybody's benefit. Because again, if one person is making that mistake, there's a very good chance that someone else is making that mistake. Um, and that's basically the discussion post. So you can find this rubric attached to every discussion assignment. When you go to grade, there are a couple of different ways that you can grade. Um, One thing to keep in mind is that when I grade or when I review you, and I review every class, every quarter. So you're not going to get one annual review from me. You're going to get 4 reviews from me at least. If you're teaching 2 classes per quarter during a session or a quarter, I may not get a chance time-wise to get to both of them, so I may just choose one of them. But generally, I find the easiest way to grade is if you go up to assessments and then click on grades, and then go to the top. And this is what I mean by um, what I find to be frustrating is that I just see like 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, which makes me really think, how well did this person really grade these discussion questions? Um, you know, I can understand that some people really are going to have exceptional discussion questions. They're usually people who post at the beginning of the week, and I'm not saying that that's impossible that there would be 100s, but it's pretty. I mean, it's when you think about it, 100% means it's absolutely complete, it's well supported, it's error free. That does not happen very often. There's at least a couple of typos, or maybe they didn't address all parts of the question fully. So just use your best judgment on this, but remember that if you give one student 100 and then you see 5 other posts that are all better than that, does that make you wonder, or does that make you think, hey, maybe that first one really wasn't 100? Because that's what I always have. That's one challenge for me when I'm grading is that we don't have extra credit, so that there is this kind of process of establishing, okay, what really is an A, and that's where the rubrics are going to come, are going to be helpful. But again, one thing that will help you with the discussion assignments is if there are errors, make sure that you deduct those. I'm not trying to bring grades down, but I am trying to avoid grade inflation, and I see a lot of grade inflation on the discussion assignments. So I just go to the top of the column, and then select grade all. And then once you're in here, you can click on the bubbles, and that will bring up all of their posts. And you can look at the dates: July 7th, July 13th, July 13th, July 13th, July 13th. So this right here was not graded accurately, because this person only posted on 2 different days, July 7th and July 13th. So they should have lost 10% for posting all on the same day. So again, that tells you that a lot of these grades unfortunately have been inflated, and we're trying to avoid that. Um, so make sure that when you do grade that you're looking at the grades. That's the 11th, the 18th, the 18th, the 18th, the 18th. Again, this grade was inflated as well. So please make sure that you're looking at the dates. And then when you're ready to grade, you can just go to the feedback column, click on the button, and then you can put your comments in here. I actually just create a little rubric for myself. I just use and I can email this to you guys. D2L, this little box will actually hold a rubric if you create one either in Word or in Excel and paste it in here, as long as it's a relatively small rubric. So what I'll do is I'll create like a little 3 by 3 table in Microsoft Word, and then I just put that into the box. And I'm going to pause this for a second and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so I just quickly made a little rubric, and so I can just copy and paste it. And I made it this way because in my class, discussion assignments are worth 10 points. 6 points are for the main post, 4 points are for the feedback. And so I just I create this, and then I can just paste this into every box, and then I'll just put like a little comment. I always try to address a student by name, like great job on your main post, uh, Ben. Maybe only one of their feedback comments was substantive, so and then I put this column here, or this row here, for writing errors. So that way, if there are any writing errors, again, 10% would be the maximum that I take off for writing errors. After that, if there are writing errors are so severe that it interferes with their content, then that becomes an issue to address in the main post. But let's say this person just had a couple of typos, then I'll just put typos. Proof read carefully. So that's it. I'll just delete that out of there. But I find that to be the easiest way um, to leave feedback. I find that it is if I use it on every assignment, it gives consistency, and I really don't have many issues with students who complain that, why did I get this grade? Because I mean, just having that little rubric seems to really clarify things for students, particularly if you start using it in LP1. And with LP1, those first couple of discussion assignments, what I'll do is in the rubric, I'll say, these are some errors that you made. I didn't deduct maximum points this time, or maybe I'll say I didn't deduct any points this time, but I will moving forward. So that way it's documented in the rubric. And that's pretty much it for the discussion assignments. Again, this is with the discussion assignments, you want to make sure that it's that compliment sandwich. I always try to make sure that I identify one thing they did well, even if it is saying, this was a tough one. Thank you for submitting it, or thank you for meeting your deadline. Even though that really doesn't mean anything, I don't want any feedback that I give student to always be completely negative. I want to keep them motivated. So I try to find at least one thing that is positive about the post, even if it's just the fact that they submitted the post. And then I try to make sure that they understand how many points I got taken off and why they were taken off, and that's why the rubric helps. Um, and once again, I thought it was going to be a 5-minute video, but it wound up being 30 minutes, so I apologize for that, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up and get it sent out to you guys. There'll be a couple more videos coming up, one on grading, one on GradeMark. I think the GradeMark one is already done. That one I believe is relatively short, but if you have a request for a video that you would like me to do, please let me know.